Greetings and salutations, my friend. I really want to talk about something that I find really important, and that is the lack of any information about detransition in mainstream media. And you know what I mean by mainstream media, liberal progressive media, at least in many Western countries, because once we started talking about conservative countries such as Poland, and of course mainstream media that is conservative, but in most Western countries mainstream media is very liberal or progressive. You know, I have heard on multiple occasions trans people talking about how detransitioners being out there with their stories will give free bullets to conservatives and anti-trans people and organizations against trans people, right? That it can access their access to healthcare, that it can have a negative effect on their life and their rights in general. And I'm sitting here thinking, well, there's a very simple solution to that, and it's if the left and the liberal and progressive media actually starts talking about it instead of giving the conservatives the monopoly on this topic. A lot of detransitioners are getting accused of going to those conservative platforms, in some cases even far-right platforms, and in some cases even fascist platforms, right? And honestly, a lot of the time, those are also the only places that welcome detransitioners, which I think is really messed up, because it makes it seem that detransition it's a right-wing phenomenon, which it really is not. It's sort of like saying that being trans or gay is a left-wing phenomenon. You know, it's not. So because a lot of the time detransitioners don't really have a voice of their own on the left, in liberal media, of course they will go to those conservatives, right? Like, where else are you supposed to go? And well, in my case, and I live in Norway, Norway might be a little different from the States or UK, but one of the biggest newspapers here in Norway actually wrote an article about me. But if you look at a vast majority of any articles that decided to write about my coming out as a detransitioner video, it's mostly online conservative and Christian and far-right papers that decided to take interest in this subject. I don't see. And the biggest article that they wrote about me, that I actually, they took a time to talk to me before they published it. It's not a progressive paper, but it's not a conservative paper either. It's very neutral in a way. I guess that falls under mainstream. But what about those papers on the left? Very liberal, progressive papers not talking about it. And why the hell are they not talking about it? Because if you actually fear that hearing the stories of detransitioners will give conservatives a free bullets against trans people, why not tackle the issue yourselves? Like, instead of avoiding the subject, instead of acting like it's not happening, how about you start talking about it and bring some nuance into it that most conservative papers and most conservative media, whether it's papers or television or any platforms online, won't give. You have the opportunity to bring nuance to the debate, but you refuse to do that. And then, in return, a lot of us detransitioners also get accused of working with far-right. We get accused of being conservative. Although, actually, being accused of being conservative isn't the worst thing that can happen. I have nothing against conservatives, even though I don't think of myself as a conservative by any means. I mean, I have very liberal views on some things, I have some conservative views, and I also have some very progressive views on some other things. Most detransitioners are not conservative, but we get lumped with that group because those are the people who usually allow us to have a platform, to have a voice, and a lot of us have a need to talk about it, which is completely understandable. The way I see it, I think that the stories of the transitioners that are being told are very important. You know, looking back at the time when I first started the detransitioning, there was nothing else about it, you know, like almost unheard of. And I was convinced I was like the only one, or 1 in 5 million that it happened to. I thought it was like something wrong with me compared to other trans people. I feel like this was a very unique experience. No one else is going through it, right? And this adds to the feeling of shame and guilt that I was experiencing. And I'm glad that this is changing, that there are voices, the trans voices out there that actually inspire more people to talk openly and honestly about their experience. And I think this is also good for our mental health when there are people out there on the internet you can listen to and feel like, hey, you know what, I'm not alone in this experience. And actually hearing the stories of other detransitioners also helped me accept myself. It helped me come to terms with what I did, and it also helped me come out. And trans people also experience something very similar when there are more trans voices out there. It makes it more relatable to people who are trans, who are struggling with gender dysphoria. I think it's good to have those voices out there. But I also think another very important thing about listening to detransitioners, and why I think it's very important to listen to detransitioners, because it gives you free data on what doesn't work. And when you do some research on that, it might help you develop better treatment in the future to reduce misdiagnosing, to reduce regret. So my goal is that the people who this will help will have access to the treatment, but those who don't end up regretting, don't end up going onto that path, right? And we need to develop better methods. And what is a better way to develop better methods than actually knowing what works and knowing what doesn't work? And if you want to know what doesn't work, talk to us, the transitioners. But a lot of those people who are very pro-trans, especially when it comes to media, do not wish to talk to us. And that really, really needs to change. I've just look at it and I'm seeing someone's knocking on my door like crazy, Jesus. I just look at it as a missed opportunity, an opportunity to do better. And while I have been working to develop better communication and a relationship with the trans community in my country and trans organizations, mainstream media is still quiet. And I really hate media because it plays into this polarization, right? Like, it will only write about anything that splits people, that creates conflict, right? So, if you read articles about me, you would get an impression that I'm someone who leans much further right than I actually do, that I'm an anti-trans person, something like that. That's just not the case. But it's you get judged very quickly when people who write about you are conservative or far right themselves. And if you dare to talk to them even, right? And here's the thing, when I first came out and got media attention, my attitude was like, you know what, I want to talk to anyone who wants to have a conversation, I want to talk to anyone who would listen. But eventually at some point I had to start saying no to platforms that I think were leaning too much to the right, or platforms that were too conservative or too anti-trans, because I would get that same label thrown on me, which it is unfair, right? Because I think it's important to have conversation with all sides, with all sorts of people, but that's not, unfortunately, that's not how media works, and it's fucked up. Let me tell you, it's fucked up. So I have to be careful who I'm talking to, otherwise people thinking like, oh, I'm one of them, I'm one of those people. And a lot of detransitioners will relate to what I'm saying here, because this happens to a lot of us. We got labeled. There is a certain prejudice against detransitioners in that sense. We get judged, throw labels on, we call things, and you know, isn't that the same thing that has been happening to gays and trans people? Like, it's exactly the same thing, but we never ever learn. And that's why I think detransitioners need their own voice. We have been used sort of as a ping pong ball between the conservative side and the trans activist side as this argument, but you know, we're not a voiceless ping pong ball. We are people with our own experiences, with our own opinions. There's very little chance that actually anyone working in a liberal or progressive media will watch this video and take it to her heart and actually think, you know what, this is a good idea. That's fat chance, right? Like, that's not going to happen. So instead, I think I have to do it on my own. You know, I think I'll start writing articles to more progressive papers about this topic, and chances are it will get me a lot of hate. It will get me a lot of hate from both sides, but I think it will also give me a lot of support. And I think this is an opportunity to change something, because if you want to change the healthcare system, if you want to make it actually better for the transitioners, I think that the right people to talk to are, it's not the right, it's not conservatives, it's not people who are anti-trans or gender critical or skeptical to the whole trans thing. I think the right people you should talk to is the progressive media and trans community. That's my opinion, at least. And if we want our voices to be taken more seriously in the mainstream media and in general, that's where we need to go. But it's a two-way street. So I really want liberal and progressive media to bring more attention to the subject. Well, thank you so much for watching and listening. I will see you in the next video, and in the meantime, take good care of yourself. Ciao.